Hello and welcome. Sinn Féin's President Gerry has been called everything from terrorist to peacemaker, depending on whom you ask. He experienced torture, assassination attempts and has lost loved ones to the violence or the troubles that have plagued Northern Ireland. But just 6 months ago, decades of sectarian conflict came to a more decisive end when Adams sat down with Protestant leader Ian Paisley at Stormont, where the Northern Ireland Assembly meets. The two agreed to create a power-sharing government in Northern Ireland in what was hailed as a new era. But can a conflict with roots going back centuries really be over? Where does the healing begin? Well, I'm joined from London by Sinn Féin's President Gerry, who's just released An Irish Eye, which is a compilation of his recent writings looking at developments in Northern Ireland's peace process. Mr. Adams, good to have you here.
Thanks, Riz.
So I've got to start off by asking about An Irish Eye. What was the reason for putting together these articles you've written over the last few years?
Well, I did a series of books on the same general theme, An Irish Voice and An Irish Journal, and An Irish Eye deals with the years 2003 on to 2004. And even from my own point of view, when I set about collating the pieces, because they were written as events were developing or immediately afterwards, I found that was a different perspective, because normally you'd only write about matters long after they had actually happened. And it actually charts in many ways the course of events in Ireland and in the peace process and the engagement with Ian Paisley through those years. And also we look at other things that happened, you know, and I was in the Middle East. I look at that issue in the Basque Country as well, in the States a few times, and some little personal things that happened also. So I would like to think that the reader would be informed and amused by some of what went on.
You don't think, we're considering that, you know, there's a sense of peace now in Northern Ireland, that there's a danger of stirring things up a bit with some of the commentary?
No, I mean the political institutions, and particularly the leaders in the political institutions, Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley, if it's not a too bizarre a metaphor, are really in a honeymoon period at this time, and both have applied themselves in a very cheerful and positive and constructive way to trying to deal with issues. But we know that the Unionists want the Union to continue, and they know that we want the Union to end and for a united Ireland to emerge. And what essentially we have agreed is an accommodation short of those two constitutional objectives, which allow us to deal with issues of equality, of poverty, of social and economic matters. And there will be big challenges. I don't underestimate there will be big challenges in terms of all of that. But thus far, the process of bedding down the institutions has processed well.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I was going to read, you mentioned about going to the Middle East, and I'll ask you about that trip, and it was a little while back, but I'll ask you about that trip in a moment. But a quote from An Irish Eye, where you refer to Abu Ghraib and the happenings there back in 2004. It says, news of the ill treatment of prisoners in Iraq created no great surprise in Republican Ireland. We have seen it and heard it all before. Then you go on to say, but our experience is that while individuals may bring a particular impact to their work, they do so within interrogative practices authorized by their superiors. And I wonder, when you look at the way things are going now in Iraq and the kind of fingers being pointed at some of the decisions made by the US government, how you view what you've written then with what's happening now.
Well, I mean, obviously armies have to act within proper protocols, but essentially once governments decide to bring armies into the situation, they close down political and other options, and armies behave as they're trained to. What we succeeded in doing in Ireland, after decades of it being described as a security problem, was to get the Irish government, the British government, the US government and others to deal with it as it should have been dealt with, as a political problem. No military solution was possible in the context of Ireland. A political solution was what was required to deal with this political problem, and that's how we've been able to make the progress that we've been able to make. And thus, I think that wherever in the world, while you may have to tweak and change, and you can't obviously transport the Irish experience into anywhere else, but certainly to deal with matters purely as security matters is always, in my view, a flawed approach. These are political issues, and they need to be dealt with in a political way.
Did you find, though, that you could have some input into what's going on in the Middle East, especially as, you know, considering what's happening now in terms of the Israeli and Palestinian situation? You went there, you met with, well, actually with both Hamas and the Fatah side, and I think that had repercussions with Israel not meeting with you. But do you find that there are lessons that could be learned from the Northern Ireland situation that could be applied to the current situation between the Israelis and Palestinians?
Well, I wouldn't be arrogant enough to think that we have lessons to teach anyone. At the same time, as we learned from the South African process, I think that people perhaps could take those bits of the Irish peace process which suits them and apply that, because in every conflict resolution process there are broad principles which need to be followed. And Sinn Féin's position is that all conflicts should be resolved through dialogue and through negotiated settlements. One of the interesting things I found in the Palestinian territories, and also we did meetings with NGOs, and although the Israeli government didn't meet us, they facilitated and were very positive in terms of the visit. And among a group that I met in Israel of NGOs and people who were working with their Palestinian neighbours, one man said, look, the vast majority of people in Israel and the vast majority of people in Palestine know what the settlement is going to be. They could sit down, 80% of the citizens of other territory could sit down and write out the settlement.
Let me ask you about...
For me that was very, very profound. And I just think what was happening there and what continues to happen there is really, really horrific. It's when one turns on the radio in Ireland in the morning and hears about incursions into Gaza, or hears about, we haven't heard this in a while thankfully, but hears about suicide bombings, it's just terrible, and the international community clearly has a big role to play in trying to sort those matters out.
I was going to go back to the Northern Ireland situation, Mr. Adams, and ask you how you view the way that the British, according to some, have made a concerted effort to meet, to honour all their obligations, actually early, if anything.
Well, in any process, getting the agreement isn't always the most difficult part, even though in our case it was hugely difficult. Implementing the agreement is daunting, and you know we would have criticisms to make of the British in terms of the delivery, but in fairness I think, and you know, I'd be very highly critical of Tony Blair in terms of his stewardship in other parts of the world, but I have to say he deserves a lot of credit. He brought a new approach when he came into Downing Street. He was a key figure, a primary mover in terms of bringing the process to where it is at this time, and so he does deserve credit. Now, you know, I'm a United Irelander. I don't want to see any British government involvement in the island of Ireland. I don't want to see Ireland partitioned for 1 second longer. So those of us who have that view have to persuade the Unionists that that's the best future, and the British government clearly has a role to play in that, and facilitating a move from the current situation in the time ahead into one in which the Irish people are in charge of our own destinies, and that's what we deserve, and that's what I think we'll be able to persuade the Unionists of in the upcoming period.
Now, we had a couple of emails for you, Mr. Adams, and one of them I have to put to you, and it sort of highlights the fact that there is obviously still scepticism among some people about the way things are. And this email from the United Kingdom puts forward the question, or put forward the comment: don't be fooled that the Republicans have given up arms. There are so many offshoots of the IRA still on the go. Now, I wonder, when it comes to controlling splinter factions, controlling every element, are you confident that can be done and that is being done?
Well, there are small groups out there. They're usually called dissident groups, but they don't have any popular support. And you know, we have challenged them. We've challenged them in Republican heartlands. They stood in the last election. They got a derisory vote. Most of them lost their deposits. So while the person who sent the email may have concerns, he or she should have no concerns about how resolute Sinn Féin is about bedding this process down and about ensuring that the days of war in Ireland are over, and they are over. And what we have to make sure is that there's never a repetition of this in the time ahead. And how do we do that? we do that by making politics work.
Well, there's another email on the other hand that comes from Jim Kearney in Georgia in the United States, who says, now that the IRA has done its part for peace, will the loyalists be willing and ready to disarm as well? And why is there such a small push for just such a thing coming from the UK?
Well, that question actually deserves a very, very lengthy answer, because it's always been one which has both bemused and surprised me. The fact is, the IRA is universally known, and although it has been on cessation now for over a decade, I'm still asked questions about that. There isn't the same consciousness, not just in Britain, but throughout the world, about these unionist groups, many of them set up by the British and operated by the British through a process of collusion. So, I mean, I think it's clear from what some military strategists on the British side have said, that they have seen the loyalist groups as their friends. Now, that isn't to say that they would accept everything that they've done, but basically are the friendly element in all of this in terms of British interest. But look, I mean, huge progress has been made, but the process continues, and dealing with all of these issues, ensuring that everybody can buy in to the new dispensation from the loyalist or unionist side, as well as from the Republican and nationalist side, is the daily challenge which faces us who are in the Assembly. And you know, I have a view that while there may be difficulties ahead, because you know we are in a honeymoon period, that those difficulties can be resolved, right. And that part of the difficulties is dealing with all of the armed groups in the period ahead.
Now, interesting enough, I know you expressed this as you wish, but an email that came in from Darrell in Michigan in here in the United States says, and let's put this in the framework of your lifespan, if you like, do you believe that there is any hope that Ireland will ever be fully united?
Yes, I don't think it's inevitable. You know, it's the right thing, and if there was justice in the world, Ireland would never have been disunited, and we would never have had British government involvement in our affairs. But life isn't like that. However, I think that we have made huge progress. I think that the political centre of gravity is moving on to the island of Ireland, that we have Irish men and women in the north working through the institutions and across the All-Ireland bodies and the All-Ireland Council of Ministers and the cross-border bodies, and everybody would acknowledge that there's a self-interest for people who live in Ireland as opposed to people who live in Britain. And we saw that probably at this time in terms of the foot and mouth scare, where the North was given a special exemption, and Ian Paisley championed with Martin McGuinness the battle for that within the European Commission. So it is my view that as we continue to bed down the institutions, as we build the future, as we deal with economic and other challenges, that more and more people will see that we have much more matters in common. And it's up for us who want a united Ireland to convince others that that's the way forward, that they can have a better shared future with others who live in Ireland than they can with anyone else. And that will also bring about a new and a much better relationship between the people of Ireland and the people of Britain.
Now, considering your aspirations and considering what you're saying and your experience, a lot of people wonder, why didn't you take the position of deputy?
Well, because Martin McGuinness, in my opinion, is much more suited for that job. At this time, I'm the party president, and you know, Sinn Fein has a big job of work to do. We're the only party organised throughout the island of Ireland with a big job of work to do, building political strength, building structures, doing all of the necessary work to try and develop Sinn Féin right across Ireland, and that's my job. And I think that Martin, since he's been into the job, and he was previously the Minister of Education in another phase of the process, he's shown by the way he's handled a lot of the matters that he does have the experience, and I think it was the right choice.
Can he overcome the questions a lot of people bring up regularly about his past and about his history with the movements?
Yes, and I mean, part of the I suppose useful role that Martin can play is that in terms, for example, of the Bloody Sunday Tribunal, where he came forward and talked in a very forthright way about some of these matters, and the fact that he was the Minister of Education, and people even from a unionist position will acknowledge that he did a very good job, particularly in terms of ensuring that small schools that were of a Protestant persuasion were kept open. He was the Education Minister who put more funding into integrated education than any previous incumbent. So all of that, I think, you know, it's like saying, can Ian Paisley overcome his history? And of course he can, because people are prepared, you see, and this is the key. There's popular support for this. People are prepared to reserve judgment on whatever they think that any of us may have done in the past, because they have seen that we're prepared to build for the future.
I have to ask you just quickly how you regard the idea, the prospect of Fianna Fáil coming and running in Northern Ireland as a party.
Well, I welcome that. I welcome that. I think it's a sign of the future. Fianna Fáil are famous for being able to send out where the public pulse is at, and clearly the public pulse for people of a nationalist and Republican persuasion is to see All-Ireland bodies, is to see All-Ireland cooperation, is to see an All-Ireland arrangement, and that includes at this point building an All-Ireland party. And as Sinn Féin is the only All-Ireland party, I think that Fianna Fáil want to be in that groove also.
I'm going to squeeze in a quick question here from Mr. Adams. We don't have much time, but this came in from Belfast native Alan, who sent this from the UK, saying, do you see a power-sharing government after 400 years of bloody conflict as a model for conflict resolution in the Middle East? If so, why can't you act as an envoy to Gaza, especially given your familiarity with the negotiation tactics of Tony Blair?
Well, if we can help, we will be prepared to help. And, you know, Martin McGuinness has been in Sri Lanka. We have just recently had Martin chairing meetings in Finland between various factions in Iraq, himself and Ralph Meyer from South Africa. I've been involved in the process now, unfortunately broken down, between people of the Basque Country and the Spanish state. So if we can help anywhere, I think that we're morally bound. We have a public duty to help. At the same time, I know from our own process that the last thing people want is do-gooders rushing in. So we have only gone to help where we've been invited, right. And if we're asked to help, we will do our best to help.
Gerry Adams, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, and very good luck, Riz.
Cheers, thank you, sir. Well, thanks for being with us. On Monday, join us for a discussion on the hopes for a green revolution in Africa. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts about that or pressing issues around the world, send your emails to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk's coming up next.